All right, this is Hyperborean Radio, Celtic God speaking. With me today is the Lore Keeper. So, yeah, I'm sure everybody's noticed by the title already what the show's going to be about. But before we get into it, make sure to stab the subscribe button, club the like button, make sure to share it around far and wide, especially to people that you hate. Why? Because it's just funny. So, oh yeah, and we gotta make sure that we participate in shameless self promotion. There we go. That's the word I was struggling to find. Shameless self promotion. We have books that's coming up. There's a small group of us actually working on several books. The one's going to be Wilder Times. That's going to be with a Y. Why? Because we can. And make sure to check out wilderhomesproject.life. And on there, you can go to the theater page. And on that theater page is a player that has all of our podcasts on it. So you can listen to us on that. As well as it's got blogs on it and music on there that you can listen to, courtesy Trova de Lid and some other stuff. Go check it out. That's all I got to say about it. So, how are you doing today, Lore Keeper?
I am doing all right. And I am actually interested to talk about this topic today, partially because of the season we're about to get into, but also just because I think, like you, I'm a little tired of the chakra stone on the duck anus kind of people with the waving of the turkey feathers and whatever.
Yeah, and this is actually revolving around what's quickly shaping up to be a book. It started off, it was going to be just a Telegram post, but I am not good at writing things that short. And then it started shaping up to be a blog, but it's quickly turning out to be a little too long for a blog post to put on the Wilder Homes Project's site. So, yeah, we're thinking about flushing this out, see where it goes. It may end up being a blog. It may end up being a short book or a long book. We're unsure yet. But, yeah, it's basically going to be about the science of magic. Yes, you heard me correctly. The science of magic. Why? Because there is science involved in the ancestral view, actually, of magic. So it is scientifically based. It's not just hopes and dreams and prayers and capturing demons and spirits and bending them to your will as if they're a slave and forcing them to do this and that, or paying them off with chicken blood or waving feathers or chants like, hey, I want a new piece of gold. It's actually based more on a scientific view, and that's including some of the outlandish stuff. Science actually shows it, and we're kind of walking through the process of it currently right now. But the science actually shows that some of the magic involved in our folklore is actually possible. Probably not probable right now because we don't know how. If we once knew, we've forgotten how. But that doesn't mean that's not possible. Like if you backed up, to when, to like the 1970s and tried explaining a modern smartphone to the people in the 1970s, they look at you like you just lost your ever-loving mind. Oh, the Star Trek things, the flip things? Well, no, they don't even have to flip. Yeah, you've lost your mind. That's never going to happen.
Well, and as tired and true as it is, it's actually a good idea for us to actually start with the definitions of both science and magic. So the dictionary definitions of science is the study of the nature and behavior of natural things and the knowledge that we obtain about them. Whereas for magic, the definition is having or seeming to have the power to make impossible things happen. Well, here's the thing is, there's actually an old saying. Well, it's not even an old saying. It's something that a lot of people who have lived in other parts of the world, typically less advanced parts of the world, that have come to America and lived here for a while have described America as, in the Western world in general. It's surreal to live here. We don't fully realize it, but between the computers and the fact that the shelves used to almost never be empty, and all these other things that we take for granted, everything from indoor plumbing to the fact that the electricity is guaranteed to be on, to roads exist. It seems kind of weird to think about it that way, but these are things that, from a different perspective, are surreal. It's like a magic bubble to them.
Right, and so those definitions, pretty much what it means is science merely describes nature. Magic is the action of doing something. That is the most basic way to break down these definitions and the way that we're using them. And anything else is just a bias put on, because there's examples, obviously, in the dictionary. Whenever there's a word, they'll give you the definition, then they'll give you an example. But the examples are extremely biased, so I left out the examples, and we're just using the definition itself. So basically, you put something in your refrigerator, you're putting it in a magical cold box. And it's a box that is magically cold.
Well, especially when you realize what exactly a fridge and a freezer actually do. Because they don't make things cold. What they do is they remove heat. And the fact that we use a box for this and electricity doesn't mean those are not other ways that this could be done, potentially. But here's the thing is, science might explain how it is, observe it being done, but the magic is actually in the fact that it even works. It's like, for example, starting a fire, for instance. You can start a fire with friction. This is technically science.
Well,
but
the science is the describing of how it's done.
Yeah, describing how it's done. But the fact that you can just rub two sticks together and create fire, that's technically magic.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's technically magic. I'd say it's full on magic, because really, if you're not there doing the thing, it doesn't happen. So it is magic, but that's not the idea. Is not to make magic mundane and boring. The idea is to show what's actually possible should we just change the way that we think of things, the way that we look at things. How are we hindering ourselves right now by clinging to this idea, and the idea, not the definition of, the perception of what science is versus the perception of what magic is. Because, well, it's not magic if you're not flinging fireballs. Well, I can fling fireballs. Granted, science can explain how I'm flinging fireballs, but if you don't know how I'm doing it, guess what it is? Even by the common perception.
Well, it's like the making of potions. Yeah, it's called chemistry or apothecary or something like that. Because here's the thing is, a lot of those snips and snails and puppy dog tails and newt eyes and bat wings, they were nicknames for plants. These magic serums and salves that are described, they're medicine, and in some cases drugs. I'm not gonna lie, I highly doubt that no witches, as people would often call them, were not just making drugs.
Right, and by drugs, it doesn't necessarily mean, what's that called? Recreational drugs. Antibiotics are drugs. Painkillers are drugs.
Yes, I'm not saying go down to your local witch to get who doubles as your coke dealer. That is not what I'm describing here. But basically, what I'm pointing out is all of these sorts of things. It's like you and I were talking about this, that this whole, abracadabra, alakazam, magical word stuff that happens in stuff, Wingardium Leviosa, Avada Kedavra, that sort of thing. These are fairly modern. If you actually look at folklore, whether it's a god, a sorcerer, or anything, magic is just done. It's a force of will. You are not, you do not have to enchant 10 different things and then draw a circle and then another circle within that circle and then a star with like 5 different kinds of shapes. You don't have to do any of that.
Yeah, because that's actually the Abrahamic description of what magic is, which then science also adopted the Abrahamic description of what magic is, which is the abracadabra, a circle inside of a circle while kissing a goat's anus. That is the Abrahamic description of what magic is. But our traditional sense of magic, like Merlin, for instance, because I brought this up to you when I first started this. Merlin, there's a row or rows of stones. They're standing up and they're in relatively straight lines. I believe it's Merlin soldiers, or I forget the actual name of it. You might know. But the story is that Merlin was marching across Britannia with this army, and then he froze them in time as stone until such time as they was needed. And how did he do it? He didn't do it with bubbling cauldrons or magic. What would that be? Chants and the calling on all. No, he just turned and did it. So it's like he just expelled his will out into the world and did this thing. Science does not preclude this from being possible. As a matter of fact, it even kind of supports it as being possible. Probable, no. Possible, yes. These two things need to be taken into consideration. So the idea of this book isn't to make the world more bland and, magic doesn't exist. No, it's to show you magic exists everywhere and you're just ignoring it.
Well, for instance, a lot of like you said, a lot of that way of how magic is described comes from the Abrahamic view. There's also, I can actually point out some of the ways that certain things got in. You have like alchemical symbols, and you also have like the writings of the Lesser Key of Solomon, which has like Gocho, which is
that's Abrahamic.
Yeah, it's the summoning of demons, many of which are actually just gods. I think I've read the list. Some of them are European, some of them are Egyptian. Some of them are Middle Eastern, stuff like that. I think Baal's in there, and he was just like a really big god for Carthage and nearby kingdoms. But basically, it's really cool, like little designs that you draw or use or whatever, and it's supposed to summon your demon. That's what Gocha is. Or I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it's basically demon summoning, and because of the Abrahamic influence, actually a lot of people ended up doing that, like Externstein, which is one of my favorite sort of standing stone sites in Europe. It actually started being used for Goya. Why? Because if enough people tell you that your gods are demons, or enough people say that that's where people used to summon the demons, eventually someone does it. It's just how it rolls. It's like
they at least start trying. That's how they start viewing it themselves.
Yeah, exactly. They start viewing it that way themselves. Like, for instance, when weirdos go to Stonehenge and start trying to summon up the reptilians from Inner Earth or something.
Yeah, so really the point is really we're all magicians, we're all wizards. It's just to what degree. When was the last time that you stood in wonder at the power of turning on a lamp? Think about everything that goes into making that lamp, and not just making the lamp, but the lights that's inside the lamp, the electricity that runs the lamp. Shit, just the switch to turn it on and off. When was the last time that you stared in wonder at something that powerful? Because if you think about it, it is a very powerful magic item. It can be explained by science, but that's what science is supposed to do. It's supposed to explain the function, how these things work. The magic spell is making it work. Because you can describe something all day long, but if nobody does it, it doesn't actually exist.
Well, one of my favorite scenes, because I'm a millennial, I grew up watching Harry Potter. One of my favorite scenes is when they have or Dumbledore has that thing where he actually can absorb light through it. Because it brings this sort of magical way of thinking into the modern day. It actually absorbed light and would bring it in, and then the lights would not work. So there was a bit of magic there as well. But here's the thing is, it's not impossible that something like that could exist, where you literally either absorb light or you cut off the ability for that object to make light and then return it or something.
Well, and here's an object that exists. There's some people that don't realize that exists, but there's an object I can carry around in my pocket. I could describe it as a magic object, and I could go to an area and tell people I can turn off all the cell phones here, and they won't work. They stay on, but you're not going to get any signal. And then push the button on my magic item, and the cell phone stop working. If they're on a phone call, it just hangs up. The internet signal stops. It's the cell phone blockers, and they do make them small enough that you can put them in your pocket. Is that not magic? Just because you know how it works doesn't mean that's not magic. And really think about it. The computer that you're listening to us on, whether it's on a cell phone, a pocket computer, or a desktop computer, or a computer receiver in your car, and you're listening to us in your car on the radio there. Do you actually know how that stuff works? I am willing to bet you no. You don't actually understand the intricacies of how it works. You also do not understand the intricacies of how it's made. The generalities of it, yes. The specifics of it, no.
Well, and actually, to use a frickin' Harry Potter reference again, everything in Harry Potter tends to function under a spell. But most people have no idea how it works, even within the wizarding world. How do the paintings talk? How do the staircases move? How did the chocolate frogs be alive? They just know it's a spell. They don't actually.
We can do all of it, but the chocolate frogs.
Well, we could actually make the chocolate frog not necessarily alive.
Well, and in the movie and in the book, they're not described as being alive. They only have 1 or 2 good hops in them. They are not alive.
Well, and to tie that into modern day, most people are kind of oblivious to most things. Like, for instance, people that don't realize that meat comes from animals. They're not entirely sure what meat is. They just eat it. Or another example would be people that don't realize, that television isn't real. On average, sometimes it's live television, but that's besides the point. Or, people that don't realize how paper's made, or people that don't realize how electricity works. I think you actually knew somebody, you've told me about him, where he would always unplug his Wi-Fi because he thought that there was a Wi-Fi shortage and there was a limited amount and he didn't want to waste it.
Yeah. He treated it like it was water. Because the internet is always flowing and you got to save the internet. So make sure to unplug the router and all that stuff so that you're not wasting the internet. Because people say now that the internet's unlimited, but we know how that turned out when it came to trees and water and oil. So, yeah, he didn't understand exactly how the internet works. But he could use it. So I guess, yeah. And magic, really, it's just the way that you look at things. The world is full of wonder, and I want to bring this wonder back. However, everybody limits themselves by this concept of what science is. And really, they're looking at science the wrong way, just like they're looking at magic the wrong way. And one of the things that I can use scientific definitions to prove, or not prove, even though mathematically a lot of stuff has been proven, different realms, different dimensions, whatever it is that you want to call it. These things are not only possible, they are most likely to actually exist. So the realms of the gods, the realms of the realm of Fae, the veil itself, that's very prominent in Celtic lore. And it's through all of Europe. It's just there's different names for it. But the veil itself almost definitely exists.
Well, and to bring this to kind of a head is, if you look at modern culture, people haven't stopped believing in magic or anything. What they've done is they have reconstituted it as science fiction. That's why there's an entire science fiction. Most science fiction is actually science fantasy, if you think about it. Like the alien races just replace elves and dwarves and orcs. The way that the science works in these science fantasy series, they work just like magic. Sometimes they even have magicians. They just relabel them as psychics, Jedi, or superheroes. You know, you have the mutant gene. That means that you can throw fireballs. That just makes them a fire mage. I mean, does the idea of the X gene in Marvel make any more sense than you're a fire mage?
Well, and another thing that got me right in on this, and again, it was supposed to just be a Telegram post, which is approximately a paragraph long. And then, well, I can't sum this up in a paragraph. Let me aim at a blog to go on the Wilder Homes Project site, and then we'll share it from there. Well, there is such a thing as too much for a blog, and I'm already a couple pages into it. Yeah, it's probably going to end up turning into novella. We figure probably at least, especially because as far into it as I am, we're going to start linking in lore and whatnot. But there was a point I was going to make, and I forgot what it was while I was explaining what the point was going to be, which is why I usually get to the point first. Nope, I forgot again. So I'm going to hand it off to you while I try and remember what I was going to say.
Well, just to get into it, like a lot of the ways people describe aliens, okay, I'm not saying that the little green men are the Fae or whatever. What I'm pointing out...
I remember what I was going to say. I got to yank this back before I forget. What started the whole subject was children. It takes almost nothing to convince them that science is real. You show them something, say this is science and this is how it's done. They're like, I get it. However, they spend years, meaning society, we ourselves spend years, decades, sometimes entire lifetimes trying to convince each other and ourselves that magic does not exist. And yet, in the back of our brains is that piece that's like, but maybe. Why are we trying to convince ourselves it doesn't exist when by definition it does?
Yes, and I want to get into something like that, but just to finish my thought so you're not left hanging there.
I'm good now.
The point I'm getting at is pretty much if you look at fairy lore and you look at alien lore, they're fairly similar. The only difference is your viewpoint. Are you talking about a magical spirit? Or are you talking about little green men, little gray men, tentacle monsters, Cthulhu? What are we talking about here? And what's happened is because, the way that heathen lore and our ethnic faiths are explained is it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, a person shows up on his 8-legged horse with his one eye and his magic spear, and he orders mead brought out and shouts and... it sounds like people were, on mushrooms or something. But what I'm getting at here is that when you actually think about it from the perspective that we do, which is not that the gods aren't gods, not that the spirits aren't spirits, but instead of viewing it from the Abrahamic lens, we view it from the heathen lens, where just because you can't explain it doesn't mean it's not spiritual or that it's not possible. There's actually a book out there.
Just because you can explain it doesn't mean it's not magic. Or just because you can explain it doesn't mean it's not magic. Doesn't mean that it's not spiritual just because you can explain the mechanics of it. So both these things are true. What you was just saying and then what I added on to it.
Well, and especially because I've actually seen this. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but there's a book out there called, I think it's like The Science of Santa or Proof That Santa Exists. And they use like quantum physics, mathematics, and all these different things. Basically, you can take, if you look at Santa Claus as myth, which is a composite of many different European myths, It's a weird subsection of the Wild Hunt. Basically, they actually try to prove it using like advanced mathematics. Now, I can't vouch for how good the math is because I haven't read it yet. But the fact that someone was like, I'm going to write an entire book trying to prove Santa's real, even if it was just for the lulz, it's still a pretty interesting thing that someone did. And that's not the only book out there like that.
Right. Now, see, what we're going to do is we're going to skip the maths, at least on this version. However, there is a couple physicists that I have my eye on if I can get their attention. We just might end up putting out some maths books if I can convince them of it to prove that all of this is technically possible. It is not limited. It is not hindered. It is actually proven possible because we can't prove that they exist yet because we're still alive and we don't have the technology to actually prove it, to cross over and verify all this stuff. But we can mathematically prove things are possible. Like the speed of light, for instance. There's a mathematical formula for it. They know that they, meaning the mathematicians that deal with this stuff professionally, know that the speed of light is not constant, yet they still apply a constant to it so that they can do the maths. Same way with gravity. They know gravity itself is not actually constant. It's not the same here as it is over there. Doesn't necessarily react in the same way, but to do practical things, they have to apply a constant number to it. Even though they know that these things exist, we know that light exists, and yet we can't really measure it. We know gravity exists, but it's very difficult to describe. But yet they can fairly easily describe the mathematic process to show that there is more than one dimension, more than one reality, or layers to the same reality. It kind of depends on how you look at it. But don't worry, we're not going to include all the maths in this one. But it would be, I would actually be interested to sit down with these people and, I don't know, probably take me a month to explain it all on a whole bunch of whiteboards to basically draw everything out and then let them go crazy with the math because I'm not a mathematician. But I love science and I know folklore and I know nature and the nature of people and yeah. And I like to think if I could lay it all out for them and spark their curiosity, their interest, they would just go freaking nuts with it because it's exciting. It's something nobody else is doing. And the basic rules of science supports the idea of magic itself. And it's really in the definition. So even the most basic magic is definitely real.
Well, I think one interesting thing to start with, I jumbled my words there a bit, but is we've actually discussed it before, which is we often state when we're talking about like creation myths in Europe, they're symbolic. I am not an Ad Humbla creationist. I am not a Rod creationist. I am not a chaos creationist. These are all very interesting, good symbolic myths. Except the Rod one, I think that one was just made up. I haven't found any folklore. But anyway, if anyone has a link to that, feel free to share it. But the point I'm getting at is we've talked about creation. So if you start out with nothingness, let's say nothingness existed at any point, just for sake of an argument. This nothingness, there is nothing there to experience time. There is nothing there to experience space. Therefore, time does not exist. Nor does space. Literally everything and nothing at the same time is occurring in a snap.
And we even have a word for that. It's called infinity.
Infinity. It was an infinite nothing. So then here's the thing, is the moment something can experience something, that means that something exists. And
let me explain to them that real quick. The general idea here of nothing is you ask somebody that was born blind what they see. They say nothing. Well, do you see blackness? Well, first of all, I don't know what blackness is. No, I see nothing. And if they get their sight back, and or somebody that's sighted ends up going truly blind, they will describe that what they see is, again, nothing. It's not black, it's not white, it's nothing. You can experience that same nothing. Close one eye. And what you see out of that eye that's closed while you're looking through the one that's open is nothing. It just turns off. You're not actually seeing black out of it. It just, there's nothing there. It's not black, it's not white, it's just nothing. That's the nothingness that you was just describing at the beginning, which is infinite and extremely finite. It's really complicated. I'm not going to get into it because that'll turn this into a science show that's about 18 hours long.
But my point being is, since all of time and space, and also none of time and space, occurred in this nothingness.
At the same moment.
At the same moment, which was not even a moment. Therefore,
because the moment didn't exist yet.
And if anything has at least a potential to happen, therefore, in that infinite nothingness of an infinite span of time, something happened. And now there is life. There is existence. So everything is existing and not existing at the same time as a result of this. But because you have to experience time and space, therefore there was
time and space.
There was time and space, and therefore nothing never existed, but nothing has always existed. So that means spontaneous existence without really any need for divine intervention can start. And from there you can have the stuff that stuff is made from, what mythology refers to as the river of life. It has no consciousness. It has no concept of self. It merely is. Now, I don't really care what you call that, but that is...
There's a lot of different names.
There's a lot of different names for that. But as a result, there's no technical need for a creator deity. However, this is where it gets interesting. We've actually discussed it before on a podcast that no longer exists. And we brought up something called a siphonophore, which is this extremely basic form of life that exists mostly in the oceans. I'm not sure if any exist in fresh water, but they exist in salt water. They are effectively a bunch of cells / species of animals that join together. They have effectively no consciousness, or supposedly, and they typically form spines in their shape, and these things tend to have different means of existence. Some of them are eyes, some of them are locomotion, some of them are digestion, some of them, their entire purpose is to produce more of the other cells. Now, let's go with the possibility that, say, something, the spirit of a people, whatever you want to call it, was able to place in one of these, or something akin to it, a consciousness and rapidly create effectively a new species. Then that would be, for example, us, or bears, or whatever was once us and bears, or whatever you want to get into with that. But this thing, this being, this spirit, would not inherently be, say, a Yahweh figure, a god of everything. It would be the god of that thing. It would be the god of that species. And that's kind of a hypothetical scenario, but it's part of what we're trying to point out is a lot of these people, they try to find this universal truth via the gods in mythology, but that's just not how it works. Like, they'll try to combine different pantheons, not realizing that those pantheons themselves are an artificial construct based on many disparate god cults of the area.
Well, and the siphonophores, really, we could point at those and say, this is part of the puzzle of convergent evolution, meaning that several races of man could spawn side by side, or one after the other, doesn't matter, independent of each other. What science currently pushes is called divergent evolution from an Abrahamic perspective, meaning one man, one woman, all the races of man spawn from this one man, one woman. However, all the ethnic faiths around the world indicate that this is not how it happened, that there are many races of man, each its own. So what the ethnic faiths are leaning towards is called convergent evolution, meaning that various animals, because evolution does exist. I mean, you can watch the world and see evolution exists. So not saying evolution doesn't exist. My argument is the state of man is due to convergent evolution. So various animals or creatures evolve into man shape. Why man shape? Because it works, and it works so well. From there, what comes first? The people's gods or the people? Is it the gods first and then the people, or is it the people first and then the gods come because the people are there? My argument is it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Some people get really hung up on that point, and if you think about it, it does not matter.
Well, either way, a people's gods are their gods. But with our people, like we've brought it up before, our various racial traits, the sunburst eyes, the fox colorations, because if you look at most northern animals, foxes, bears, even wolves to a certain extent, they have various hair and eye colors. It's because you have to adapt to different areas depending on where you live. If you're further south, if you're in the woods, if you're on the coastline, if you're on the prairie, there's different uses for hair and eye. It's like when you're on a ship. During the daytime, it's more advantageous to have brown eyes. So if you're mostly like coastal fishermen that don't get too far away, you might develop more brown eyes because blue eyes are less useful.
Like in the Netherlands.
Like in the Netherlands, it's actually really common to have blonde hair and blue eyes. Not blue eyes, brown eyes. Brown eyes and blonde hair because they're mostly coastal fishermen. They live near the coast, but then they also they tend to be outdoors a lot, especially in an area with very few trees because they cut down all their frickin' woods. So what do you end up with? Mostly open sky, so there's no forest or cavernous camouflage where brown comes in handy. Then you have our various tones of peachish white skin. And then you also have the sunburst eye pattern. And you also have our texture, which is closer to fur than most of the other races.
Our ability to tan.
Our ability to tan, to adapt to different climates or amount of sunlight. And you also have the vellus hair, which not every race has. That's actually kind of a giveaway with some people. Then you have our musculature, our bone structure, how we mate and breed.
Anyways, we're talking about magic.
We're talking about magic, but this is where I'm getting at with this, is if you start actually paying attention to the differences, we already live in a Middle Earth. The Africans, the Sub-Saharans, they are a different race of man. Same with the Asians, of which I think there's like 3 or 4 of them if you listen to them. The Polynesians, distinct. The Abos, distinct. The Mesoamericans, distinct. Etc., etc., etc. There's quite a few actually out right now if you listen to all the different folklores. And variations within. But, so if you're looking for, a magical world where there's different cultures with different diets and different looks, and they look completely different from each other.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! Congratulations, you live in a world with multiple sapient populations.
Right, and again, it would, arguing from convergent evolution, which is a scientific thing, it's actually kind of magical that this shape would be taken on again and again and again, and simply because it's useful. It is a very good shape, but only so many animals in a given region can have a particular shape. Like in any particular region, there's only so many kinds of bears. Why? Because there can only be so many kinds of bears. They compete against each other. There can be more than one type of bear on a continent, but they're going to be spread out. And then really, how different are they really? There's only so many types of cats native to a particular region. Why? Because that's how nature works. That's the magic of it all. That's what causes the diversity of it. And then let's go straight back to just weird with a Y, and let's throw an E at the end of it. Just weird, super weird. We have spirits. Science explains that these things are actually possible. The only reason why they deny them is because we can't measure them yet. But they're still possible. They don't deny the possibility of it. What they deny is that they're there because we can't figure out how to measure them yet. Even though there's a lot of people that believe in spirits, ghosts, gods, but they can't be measured. So science has to say, well, we can't prove it. So therefore they can't really explain it because they can't track the thing to measure to be able to explain it. So all these nature spirits, there's a distinct possibility that they're real. It is distinctly possible that they're real. Multiple realms. You might call them dimensions or realities. But what is that except for a realm? A realm of the gods, a realm of the spirits, a realm of the fae. And these would just be a very few small number of them. And all interconnected, all existing at the same time, just in different phases of reality is basically how science is currently explaining it. And you know what? That actually matches up with our folklore, passing through the realm of man into the realm of fae physically, and then potentially either coming back minutes later or centuries later. These things happen in our folklore. It's technically possible. So there is that high magic and the everyday magic that we've been taught to not see. From the act of starting the engine in your car, to your car moving, turning on a light, walking in the door, turning on your stove, lighting a fire outside. If you shoot a firearm, that going bang, it's all magic. And I really want to bring the magic back to people. Talking to animals all over in the folklore. What's stopping you from talking to animals? I've seen people that refuse to do it. And I'm like, why? What does it hurt? Well, they can't understand it. Are you certain? Are you certain that they can't understand you? They might not understand all the nuance, but I've seen you talking to your dog. Why not talk to the squirrel? Have you ever tried it? Maybe they might pay attention. They might not understand every word that you're saying, but they might understand the intent of your word. There's a couple squirrels out here again. I talk to them. Yeah, it's all right. We put that pumpkin out for you because we put out pumpkins already. And the squirrel is all checking me out. I'm like, go ahead, have the pumpkin. That's what it's there for. We put it out here for you squirrels and the chipmunks and the birds. So you better get your share now. And straight away he went to ripping it apart, crawled right inside of it. Wasn't worried about nothing. But he was looking at me, so it's almost as if even if he didn't understand the words, he understood the intent of what I was saying. Is that not magic?
Well, and I know that some people get kind of hippy-dippy about it, but that's sort of kind of the point for ethnic faith. I hate using this word, but paganism is because it teaches you how to work with rather than against nature.
We don't need all those ceremonies.
No, we don't need all those ceremonies and rituals. You want a ceremony? Halloween's in about a month. Get ready. And here's the thing is, it's a season. So it's actually starting fairly soon. It's just that the main heyday of this season is typically like October 30th through November 2nd. That's like the whole range. That's like the peak. And here's a fun fact. Nightmare Before Christmas actually got some things right because Halloween and Yule kind of bleed into each other. And they're both depending on the group that you're in. which tribe you are descended from. They're both technically end of the year festivals, because I think some people treat Samhain, which is mostly what Halloween's derived from, as an end of the year sort of festival, while others treat Yule as that, and it tends to vary tribe to tribe. So, but it's all these sorts of things, and actually, if you think about it, it makes sense that there would be rough estimates when the distance between different dimensions would shrink down. I personally prefer to use words like realm than dimension, simply because dimension has this cold J.J. Abrams feel to it. So,
yeah, that's why I have a tendency to call it realm too. It just gives me the warm fuzzies on the inside. But if somebody calls them dimensions, fair enough. It's close enough. It's just I like the warm fuzzies, so I like to call it realms. But yeah, the thinning of the veil, the thing that separates the realms from each other. And then Halloween, Samhain, there's probably 1,000 different names for the Halloween time of year. There's probably 1,000 different names for the Yule time of year. It's actually 2 peaks, 1 season. It is the way it was actually kind of celebrated. And yeah, life had to be done all normal, like on the in-between. But that doesn't mean it wasn't this big, long thing that you're aware of. Just because you go to work on Christmas Day doesn't mean that you're not aware that it's Christmas Day. If you go to work on American Thanksgiving, doesn't mean that you're not aware that it's American Thanksgiving. You're perfectly aware that it's American Thanksgiving. However, you are doing the things that you have to do. That's just the way life works. Same way on the Halloween. So it's not the idea that we're supposed to take all this time off and just focus on the celebration, because life doesn't work that way. It's more being aware of it and working up, a steady working up to the peaks.
well, and in all honesty, if we didn't work when there was a holiday season on, we'd never work, because Europeans have holidays back to back to back to back to back, and that's one group. Like, not even counting like all of Europe, which pretty much has a holiday on every day.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's every day is important, which is part of the magic. That's part of the magic, is every day is important, and we should live that way. It's like really that's the point of almost everything that I explain. And you're taking the magic out of it. No, you're refusing to see the magic in it. It is so dang important. Everything is so dang important. Well, if you're not scared of death, what's the point of living? What? I don't understand that concept. That's exactly why you live. You can live more because you're not afraid of dying. There's a difference between surviving and living. Life is to be lived to the fullest, to experience as much of it as we can. Well, if you say that there's no such thing as an afterlife, which, by the way, an afterlife is scientifically possible. But some people will be like, you poop all over the idea of an afterlife. And sometimes you say, it doesn't matter if there isn't one. If there's no afterlife, then what's the point of living? That's exactly the point then. That is the biggest point. If there is no afterlife, then all you have is life. Live it, and live it so well that you are remembered forever. But, yeah.
Well, I'll get into, there's a Nietzschean concept.
Apparently I was getting too heavy.
But there's a Nietzschean concept called eternal return. It's mildly atheistic, but basically what it is, you know that whole, when you die, your life flashes before your eyes? Okay, at the end of flashing before your eyes, your life flashes before your eyes again. And then again. And then again. And then again. Because at the end of your life flashes before your eyes. So effectively, the concept of eternal return, to simplify it down, is you die and then you relive your life. Time is sort of slowed down and dilated while you're dying. And it feels like a really long time. But basically, you relive over and over again your own life. So every decision you make, every choice you make is going to be relived. So doesn't that make everything you do now that much more important? Do you really want to relive all this stuff?
Well, and that's not to make it all horrifying, because that's where some people are going to take it, because they've been taught to fear death. Anyways, they've been taught to fear death. So, the torment of dying, because regardless of the pain, I'm going to have to relive my life over and over and over again, and what feels like forever for me. And people that are scared, they're just going to find reasons to be scared. I am not here to make you feel better, but I can reassure you that in that moment of, what was it that you called it? The eternal return. In that moment, it also passes in an instant. So it takes forever and absolutely no time at the same time. And in the end, we're all going to be there. So we may as well live life while we can, enjoy the magic of life, and stop trying to convince ourselves that it's boring, that it's mundane, that it's just something to be tolerated until we can get through it, while we live in fear of the end of it. That makes absolutely no sense. The world is so full of magic. Enjoy it and live.
Well, I actually got into an argument. I was actually on someone else's live stream. This was a while ago. But they had a lot of Christians in their audience. And the Christians were basically like, well, some people just want a nice place to go when they die. And they had ignored, I had discussed like 12 different versions of the afterlife that exist in European ethnic faith. So I finally decided to tell them what I thought of cowards that are only living to die, who I know, when things get bad enough, will just fall on their knees. They'll run, or they'll fall on their knees and accept it. If you want a ticket to heaven that freaking bad, there's one under your sink. Drink up. The world is just going to keep getting harder. It's going to keep getting more in need of heroics, more in need of strong people. If you're a coward, take a good long look in the mirror. We don't need that kind of people.
Right, and that's what I mean by enjoying life. I don't mean it in a hedonistic, YOLO kind of way. I mean, live a life that's bigger than life, one worth living. Live one that's courageous, one that inspires other people, because that's how you're remembered. I mean, really, it is. Do we remember the humdrum people? I mean, we have a hard time remembering the heroes, because we have so many heroes in our history, in our bloodlines. There are so many heroes, and yet we don't know them all. We can't know them all. So your best chance is to be the most heroic hero that ever heroed. And how do you do that? By actually living life. And you don't live life in fear. You don't live life in fear of what if, maybe, but, no, that's not how you achieve that. And that's for the people that don't believe in an afterlife at all. That's your only chance. If there's no afterlife, if you firmly believe this is your only chance. Live it big so that you're remembered. I myself do believe in an afterlife, and I still live life as big as I can. I mean, just talking to you guys, I was told that it'd be impossible. Oh, nobody will listen. Nobody will pay any attention. You're just going to end up talking to dead air. There's no point in doing that. And yet, here we are, talking to you guys. Oh, there's no point in making a website. Nobody's ever going to look at it. It's never going to do anything. Oh, there's no point in making a magazine. Nobody's going to look at the magazine. Nobody's going to care. Just give up right now. Lay down. No, screw that. I'm trying. I'm doing everything that I can. Even in my personal life, I live as big as I can in any given moment. When I'm in pain, well, shit, at least I know I'm alive. Muscle through this do this and that when it's not hurting, and even when it is, screw it. It just kind of muscle through and keep on going. Don't, oh, but it hurts so bad. I can't. It's the worst pain that ever pained ever in all of history, and nobody understands the level of pain that I currently go through. No matter how bad it gets, folk, somebody out there had it worse. I mean, there's no point in whining about it. Just take care of it and keep moving on. But live big for your children, your friends, your family, your grandkids if you have them, for everybody around you, the strangers that see you. Let them see you walking with pride, a smile on your face, and just be fucking bold and belligerent, because that is another kind of magic. I didn't want you guys to think walked away from the whole magic topic, because all of this is magic. All of it. Oh, you was looking at me expectantly. I thought that maybe you had something to say. Was I saying something really interesting, or no? Yes? You don't know? You falling asleep? But yeah, it's all magic, and it doesn't. I don't even know where to go with this, because when I wake up in the morning, I see magic all around me. I know most people do not. As I go through my day, I see magic all around me, from the movement of the clouds in the sky, the breeze on my skin, the squirrels running around, the bugs crawling on the ground, the birds flying, the flowers blooming. All of this is magic to me. The water that runs out of the tap, the heat that goes from the fire through the pan into the food. To me, all of that is magic, and it actually kind of makes me sad that most people can't see it. They're just like, oh, the world is so without magic. No, you're constantly doing things. You're alive. That is magic. You don't need chants. You don't need special candles. You don't need to salt your garden by putting rock salt in your garden to keep the evil spirits away. You don't need to do that for magic. What you need to do is do things. And I suspect, I can't prove it, but I suspect that if you can develop your will to an iron level, that you could perform Merlin level magic. That you could perform magic on scale with the old man on the mountain. I forgot what everybody else calls him, Rubizel. You could perform magic on scale of pulling lightning from the sky. It is possible. Not probable, but it is possible. Is your will that strong that you could do that? No amount of shaking rattles is going to make it happen. No, I just hope. I just hope beyond hope. Because how many of you have hit the lotto with your hope? Just hoping. Hoping, and you actually even went through the step of buying a lottery ticket. How many of you have hit the jackpot with that hope? I'm guessing none. Maybe one or two out there. And congratulations. Yay, you win. But it is theoretically possible, and I'll explain why in this thing that we're writing up, for an iron will to literally bend reality. Because it's not against the rules of nature.
Well, and just as an example of more metaphorical freezing of armies or things of that nature, like how Ben Franklin, the nerdy guy with glasses, he had the key and the stovepipe and all those sorts of things. He was actually so terrifying to the British troops that if they found out he was in charge of a opposing force, they would leave. They would run away. That is how iron his will and renowned his strength in the battle was.
All right, and I just looked at the time. So we managed to run through our hour. People that listen to our Uncensored, I'm sure that you noticed that we didn't do one this last Wednesday. That was due to a training accident. Stuff happens. We will have one coming up this Wednesday. So for those of you that listen to Hyperborean Radio Uncensored, Thank you. We've actually been garnering a lot of listens. We really appreciate that because that does help us out financially so that we will eventually be able to get new gear, better setups, maybe a sound booth someday. But working forward on all this stuff, it also helps us get research materials and whatnot. Really appreciate it. Thanks. So on that note, I already said to do all the YouTube stuff, share us around, check out the stuff. So there's all the shameless plugs. And I'm going to say, live boldly. Don't be quiet. Don't keep your head down. Don't be safe. But by the gods, keep your powder dry because the shit's about to get real. And until then, see you guys next time.
Well, I'll simply leave with this. You, me, CG, the statistical chance of any of us being alive is minuscule. The statistical chance of us being where we are right now is also so minuscule that not only ourselves, but where we are is an impossibility. I mean, you have basically a 50-50 shot of living or dying every day. So every day is a gift. Our very existence is a gift. And I think we should enjoy it because you, me, CG, the crazy guy screaming in the middle of the street somewhere, we're all a little bit magical ourselves. And with that, the lore keeper's out.